Alright, so on the bench today is the air filter for the CT90 and the carburetor, or I should say carburetors, because with this bike I got the original carburetor here, but I also got this aftermarket carburetor which the previous owner told me ran better than the original. The issue with this aftermarket carb is, one, I have a hard time believing that it's better than the original. And two, it runs this ugly pod filter instead of the original air filter. I really like the look of this original air filter, so I'd really like to get this air filter back together, which means repairing this broken tab on the side and then replacing the foam. And I'd also really like to get this original carb working. And the problem is this carb is missing a bunch of parts. So I went ahead and found another one on eBay. This is from the exact same year, so a few things are different. You can see it's got this screen and a couple other things are different, but the important parts are the same. So once I get the important parts of this carburetor into the one I got with the bike, and I get this air filter back together, we should have this engine carbureted just like it was in 1971. Alright, so actually when I got the carb, this throttle was stuck, but I just threw some WD-40 down there, and luckily now it's pretty smoothly coming up. There you go. And I'm going to leave the choke plate and the choke lever just as is. No reason to take it apart. Also, good practice to count how many turns in before you take out either of your idle screws. Oh, feels like that one's actually bottomed out. That's a little concerning that the idle mixture screw is just chopped like that. I would think it'd be more of a neat taper. I wonder if it's broken off in there like my other bike. Alright, so when I shine my light down that hole there, you can see light come through there, so I don't think the screw is broken off. That's good news. There's 2.5 turns out. This screw just sets the resting height of the throttle slide, so it's just kind of an idle speed screw, so probably not quite as finicky as the idle mixture screw. There's a spring on that as well. Alright, so you can see the last, I'm not sure what it's called, but it is a jet that pokes out into the venturi area under the throttle slide. I think you can stick a punch from the top here and punch it out, but I don't want to damage it, and I don't really see any reason to do that, so I'm just going to leave it as is. Alright, so with that, the carb is fully disassembled, and now I'm going to go ahead and disassemble the other carb. Okay, well, I can see why this guy sold this carb. This jet and this jet are both completely snapped off. I mean, this was not me just now. I put almost no effort into taking these out. But that's fine. These are not the parts I needed from this carb. The parts I need are the petcock lever and the altitude compensator. I don't really see myself getting above 6,000 feet, but I definitely need something to plug that hole in my carb over here for when I'm not above 6,000 feet. Uh-oh. Alright, I'm definitely not finding that, so have to figure out something to replace it. Alright, I just realized something kind of funny. So look, this is the carb I bought off eBay. It's got threads there. It's got threads there for this section to thread into, right? Well, here's the carb that I got with the bike. There are no threads. Not even stripped threads. There just are not threads. And I thought the holes at the end there were just plugged up with some dirt and stuff, but actually using a little pick, I've determined that there aren't actually passages there to let air in. So for whatever reason, this carb does not have an altitude compensator, which is interesting because if you look at the plastics from this bike, altitude compensating carburetor. Pull knob when operating over 6,000 feet. So it's kind of interesting. I don't know if this is the original carb or if this is a different carb that a previous owner bought at some point, Who knows, but point is I don't actually need the altitude compensator for this carb. But I still needed this donor carb because I needed the petcock lever and cover and everything. So now I have an OEM gasket kit, and I'm going to go ahead and replace all the gaskets and rebuild this carb. A friend of mine gave me some guitar strings. I'm going to use these to try to clear out this idle passage. Feels a little clogged when I throw the carb cleaner down it. So I'm going to wait until we have the bike running to mess with the float height or any of the idle screws. For now, I'm just putting them in exactly how I found them. Oh, what? Alright, so as you can see, this screw is not grabbing because I just stripped out those threads. So luckily I have this other carb bowl, so I can just use this. It should just swap in, no problem. But definitely a bummer, and I'm going to be very careful of that for this next one. Alright, I really did not want to push those screws too far. Seam is pretty good. If there's a leak, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. For now, let's just do the rest of the carb. Alright, so this is the idle mixture screw I took out of the carb I got with the bike, and I was worried it was broken off, but this is the idle mixture screw from the eBay carb. So you can see that's just, I guess, the design. I also bought an OEM throttle cable because I figured the throttle cable for the aftermarket carb probably wouldn't work. Alright, this literally took me all night. Well, actually, I just struggled with it for like an hour last night. Then I went to bed, and I came back to it, had a new idea, used this guitar string, tied around the end of the cable, and I pulled it through. This thing, I could not get the cable through this little adjuster. I thought about bending the adjuster, thought about altering the cable. I'm really glad I didn't have to do that. Just used a guitar string. Using regular thread didn't work because the thread kept breaking, but this guitar string wouldn't break, and I got the cable through the adjuster here, and now we've got our cable through the cap of the carb. Okay, so now I'm going to put the spring on the cable and compress it a little bit so I can get the cable onto the slide. Then we're going to drop this whole thing down into the carb, making sure that needle is getting into the jet, thread it all down. Now I'm going to pull on the other side of the cable. You can see we have throttle action. When we took apart the carb, we saw that the air mixture screw was fully seated and the throttle height adjustment was 2.5 turns out from fully in. I'm going to make a note of this 2.5 out, but if that corresponded to fully seated for the air mixture screw, then I think there was something wrong. So what I'm going to do is just go by the book here, which says for the air screw on the CT90, it should be 1 3/8 plus or minus an 1/8 turn. Should give us around there. And then for the valve seat screw, 1.2 turns. 0.2. And then we'll adjust those once we get the bike running in hopefully just a couple weeks. Alright, so now we have the fully rebuilt OEM carb. Does not have the altitude compensator because we determined there weren't the threads or the passages. As for the donor carb, the last thing I'll mention is you saw me lose this hairpin here, and I actually just used a different hairpin clip from just like a generic hairpin set, and it works decently now. If you pull this out, it remains out. That would be the altitude compensation, and then you can push it in. If it had a knob, it'd be a little easier, but you can use a regular hairpin if you just shave it down so it's a little thinner, and the function works, I would think, just the same. Alright, so we got our carb all rebuilt with OEM parts. So now let's move on to the air filter. And as you can see, while this air filter was being kept in the garage and off the bike, some mice made it their home. See, they got all kinds of stuff in there. That gray fluff you see in there is actually parts of the air cleaner element. You can see they ate a lot of that. So went ahead and I got a new air cleaner, And so we're gonna clean this all up. And then this tab here, this mounting tab, you can see is broken off. So I bought some ABS plastic and we're gonna clean this up and try to get a new tab on there so we can mount it up to the bike. Alright, so like I mentioned before, the important part of repairing this is getting this tab fixed here. So for that, I got this piece of ABS plastic. I couldn't find one in the matching gray color, so I just went with black. And I think all we're going to do is cut out a few tabs and then fix it all here, because this is only about an 1/8 inch thick, and I want something closer to maybe 1/4. So maybe 2 tabs. We'll see what 2 tabs look like. So if you don't know, acetone kind of melts ABS plastic, which is what the CT90 plastics are made of. So what you can do is you can put acetone on both sides and let it melt a little bit and then become tacky, stick them together and hold them for a few seconds, and supposedly the bond is like pretty much just as good as the original form. So you can see that it's starting to melt, kind of make like a little bit of a paste. So I'm gonna let that kind of sit on there and keep melting a little more. Do the same thing to this side. You do want to be careful because the acetone also melts the paint, but this is the back side of the filter, so I'm not terribly worried about that. Alright, let's see if we can't stick these together now. Let's try one more time. Alright, so I just put some scrap of that ABS plastic in here with some acetone to make kind of like a paste. I'm going to use that just because I think it'll help kind of fill any of the cracks in the joints. So I got the first panel on there and I'm about to put the second panel on there. Alright, so this little plastic tab feels great. It feels really sturdy. So I'm going to leave it for now because I want to set the luggage rack up and set the whole air filter up there before I pick my spot for my hole to put the bolt into the frame. But before that, I can still reassemble most of the air filter now that it's cleaned and I got the tab on there. So initially I thought I had to oil the air filter, but you can see here, oil or water will cause the element to become clogged and will result in lowered engine performance. So I think they just want a clean, dry air filter. So that makes sense because this whole setup is sort of supposed to be watertight anyways. So here's the new element. This is an OEM. Here's the part number if you're interested. And so the way this works is this goes on here. Oh, you know what? This this thing already is oiled. So I'm just going to leave it. Yeah. You know what? It smells like what the old air filter smelled like. So I guess that's just like some factory oil. I mean, I just took it out of this bag. Gosh, I wonder how old that packaging is. So anyway, I suppose I'm just gonna leave the oil on there, even though the book says that oil will clog the filter. Seems a little big, doesn't it? A little long. Alright, so it didn't even occur to me to check the lengths of these two pieces. I figured they're both OEM pieces, but yeah, it looks like this thing I got is a little bit too long. You can see that the metal element is about 1 inch shorter than the foam there. But I went on this website's super helpful. This guy, the CT90 restoration blog, and he has this thing on the air filter elements, and you can see here, look, there are a couple different sizes. It looks like this one, this top left inner element size, is a bit longer than these other ones, and mine is more like these. So I'm assuming this foam is just for maybe a different year of the bike, but I'm sure it'll still work. So I'm just going to take my razor blade and cut it down to length. Alright, so now I can put together the filter. It took me a second to like align everything so it would fully seat, but you see how you want the inner and the outer pretty much flush here so that you can put the cap on here and throw the bolt on. That rubber gasket in there is the original one, and that's because the oil on the filter keeps it soft. So that's this part all done now. And so now, put it on this side. I think originally this is a wing nut, but on my bike it's this little regular nut. Alright, so there's the air filter rebuilt. This boot is in great condition. It's like soft still, and I'm going to keep that. This boot for the carb side is pretty stiff, but I think if I just hit it with a hair dryer, I can get it on the carb. And so I'm going to keep it for now, because there's no cracks in it or anything, and I can always get it a replacement later. Alright, so I want to get this luggage rack on so I can attach the air filter to the luggage rack and to the one mounting hole we have, and we can map out that second mounting hole. But before I do that, I want to clean and throw some of this stuff that I just got yesterday. It's just like the cheap turtle wax and dry. So you wash the bike and then you kind of dry it with this spray. So I don't know, I thought it'd be nice to give it a little shine. I doubt it will hold that for very long, but I don't know. That'd be a good experiment. This frame is already nasty, so we don't really have anything to lose. Just have hot soapy water. I'm gonna give the whole thing a good scrub. Then we'll wipe it down with some cloth and this spray. Alright, so the bottle says, wash car and rinse. Skip drying, leave car wet. Shake product well. Simply spray one panel at a time and dry and shine. So I went ahead and got all new hardware for the luggage rack mounts. So I'll throw these on off camera. It's just nuts and bolts. Then I can get the luggage rack on. Alright, so it is many weeks later. Got the luggage rack on. So I got the air filter on here, mounted down here on the bottom. I've just gone in here and I've marked, made a little X there about where I think that hole is. So I'm going to drill a hole there. I think I'm going to put maybe one more piece of plastic in there because you can see there's a pretty big gap. And then drill that out and should be good to go. Alright, if there's a better way to get this air filter on, then please let me know, because this is how I've been doing it for the test fits, and it's definitely kind of awkward. So here's the completely rebuilt air filter. See, the tab we added looks really good. I put that extra piece of plastic on there for some thickness, and then I cut it shorter. And it's really secure on there, so I'm really happy with how this turned out. I'm going to be uploading a video every Friday on this bike until it's all back together and I can take it for a ride. So thank you for watching.